By every metric, the border is a disaster. Despite the rhetoric of the administration, the numbers reported by the Border Patrol of caught and known getaways are off the chart. Our border states and our communities have been overrun, and now many of our major cities, most of them Democratic, are saying literally that you're in the process of destroying their cities. The polling indicates that the public agrees with all of that. They have little confidence with the administration's border policies. And so, you mentioned the numbers and how it's been growing through the years. In 2017, there were 2 million people running around the country waiting for adjudication. When the Biden administration took over, there were 3.6. Now there's 6.5 million, so it's almost doubled. Right now, you've got 800,000 people that have been adjudicated waiting for their day in court. These are people that have been said that they've got probable reason for asylum. What you're asking for does nothing to get those numbers down. I mean, that's the problem. That's what Senator Hoeven was talking about. We need metrics so that once we put what you're asking for in place, that you'll have a significant reduction. And to do 800,000 people, that backlog is impossible based on what you're proposing. 6.5 million people running around waiting for some sort of adjudication. The list goes on and on. You mentioned fentanyl. I think you said, quote, that you were doing an exceptional job. It's the leading cause of death in Arkansas regarding overdoses. By July of this year, Arkansas State Police had seized 12 pounds of fentanyl, enough to kill everybody in the state. So your testimony and what is actually happening, there's no basis in fact. So I guess the question is, what are we going to do about it? I agree with Senator Hoeven. We need some metrics. We need what, if we put in place what you're asking for, how's this going to address the numbers? The 6.5 million people that are running around here, how's it going to address the 800,000 backlog? And we're not talking about getting that down to, I think what you're proposing at best just keeps it as it is now. There's not going to be any reduction. Am I wrong in that?
Yes, you are.
So give me a reason for that. Give me some numbers.
Senator, first of all, I want to make it clear, the devastation.
Give me a reason that we're gone from 3.6 to 6.5 million.
Senator, is it your assertion that the hiring of additional Office of Principal Legal Advisor attorneys at Immigration and Customs Enforcement with a complement of additional immigration judges would not work to advance the immigration case backlog in immigration court proceedings?
I don't know. Tell me how many. Tell me how many that would do, because I think probably what that would do is just maintain where we're at right now.
That is absolutely
with
false.
The people that are coming across. Well, give me the numbers that it would do.
Senator,
make it where it is false.
Senator, I would be very pleased to confer with you and Senator Hoeven to discuss the quantification of advancement that we would accomplish with additional funding. But I think it is rather axiomatic, quite frankly, that additional Border Patrol agents will advance the security mission at the southern border. I think it is rather axiomatic, quite frankly, that additional non-intrusive inspection technology at our ports of entry will advance our efforts to interdict fentanyl.
What I want to know is this. If we put your program in place, in fiscal year 24, instead of having 800,000 waiting for adjudication, what number would that be? Instead of having 6.5 million people running around here that have been running around for a long period of time, what would that number be in 24 and 25? And you should know that, because that's what we're trying to accomplish, is to make a dent in those numbers, to make a difference. I don't know if what you're proposing just simply keeps us where we're at. I don't know how it's affecting, and it's sad that you don't appear to know either. I mean, if I was bringing forward a proposal to the, I'm sorry, but if I was bringing forward a proposal, I would know what it actually did, okay?
Secretary Myers, if you want to respond, and then I'll go to the next one.
I think I've said, thank you very much, Chair Murray. I think it is rather non-controversial that the addition of personnel and technology in the system would advance the efficient operation of the system, would advance the security of the border, would advance the security of our country. And I think it is also equally axiomatic that fixing our broken immigration system, a fact about which everyone agrees, would advance it even more significantly.
Thank you,
But
Senator.
we are addressing the emergency of the emergent issues, the need for additional funding for our personnel and our agencies.
Thank you. Senator Merkley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me ask that same question a little bit differently. Secretary Mayorkas, if we were to acknowledge that the 4-year wait for asylum hearings is just way too long and it's a tremendous backlog, what type of resources would it take to, you've asked for $755 million for more asylum officers and immigration service officers, asylum corps and so forth, but what type of resources would it take, say over a 2 or 3 year period, to bring that 4-year backlog, say, down to 6 to 8 months or something like that? Do you have any sense of the size of the challenge? Just a short answer. I'm just trying to get a broad picture.
Senator, the funding, the additional personnel will make a material difference in that adjudicative timeline in the context of a broken immigration system. We actually issued a regulation, the asylum officer rule, that legally empowered asylum officers to make the ultimate adjudication, which also brought that 4+ year timeline down to under 18 months. So we are very intensely focused on that reparative solution that is so vital to a more functioning immigration system.
So the average timeline has dropped to 18 months?
In the context of the asylum officer rule, we did start to see tremendous acceleration.
I'll follow up with more detailed questions, because I think it's a common concern. That long wait time is, you need to have enough time for people to prepare their asylum case fairly, but not so long that is essentially years waiting while you fall in love, you have children, you get married, or whatever that complicates the whole damn system.
Agreed.
I want to turn to you, Secretary Becerra, and just note that when I go do my town halls in Oregon, I have one in every county every year. Every single town hall this year, child care comes up. People can't find it, they can't afford it. And that's with the extra help that we have now. But that came to an end at the end of September. How important is it that we act for the child care funds that are in this emergency request?
Important enough to say that in your state of Oregon, likely more than 80,000 children will be impacted if we don't get these stabilization funds. Likely more than 3,200 of your child care providers will be impacted and may have to close if they don't have the resources to pay wages. Likely that you would receive for your state somewhere upwards of $150 million to help those child care programs.
So I think that's very helpful. Thank you. And I will say that this comes up in the context not just of families who need child care, but also in the businesses that are desperate for employees and know that the major source of potential employees are home providing child care. There's not affordable child care. So it's a win-win for the family and for our businesses that need employees. Is that not the case?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary Mayorkas, I want to turn to the Family Case Management Program. I have a report from the Inspector General on the Family Case Management Program in 2017, and it noted that according to ICE, overall program compliance for all 5 regions, an average of 99% for ICE check-ins and 100% attendance at court hearings. In other words, every family that had a case manager basically turned up for their hearings. Now, my various colleagues have said, we have a real concern about the long wait time, that people just disappear and don't show up for their hearings. But 99% at ICE, 100% at court hearings. What would it take to get a case management program in place so that every family going through the immigration system is part of a family case management program?
So, Senator, we have that in a pilot form through our Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. I'd be very pleased to follow up with you with respect to what resourcing would be required to expand it far more broadly.
Thank you, because I was really struck by the effectiveness of that program. And one of the first things the Trump administration did, they shut down the family case management program. And I never understood, like, if you're arguing that people disappear, why would you shut down a program that ensures 100% attendance at court hearings? But I've also been frustrated that the Biden administration hasn't restored this program over the last 3 years to cover everyone. So I'd love to see what resources that would take. Finally, I want to turn to the Flores settlement. Anadith Reyes Alvarez, the 8-year-old, died after 8 days in CBP custody. The Flores settlement said no one should be in CBP custody for more than 72 hours. I know that a lot of changes were made following her death in custody. You might recall she had the situation of sickle cell and heart condition, and family made super requests. The little girl pleaded for help, and she died and had a seizure and died. How close are we to actually honoring the Flores settlement so that no child is in CBP custody for more than 72 hours?
Senator, I'm very familiar with the tragedy of that child's passing. We did indeed take a whole series of measures immediately following that to understand how that occurred, why it occurred, and to make sure it doesn't occur again. We are in compliance with the Flores settlement. Children are indeed in our care for under 72 hours before we turn them over to our partners at the Department of Health and Human Services, and I'd be very pleased to provide you with that data as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Capito.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank both of you for being here with us today. Secretary Mayorkas, you wrote an op-ed arguing that in the Washington Post that and you've repeated that today, the immigration system is broken because Congress has not acted. You did say in response to Senator Graham that the policies need to be not piecemeal or I don't know if I'm quoting you. I might have quoted one of the other senators, not piecemeal but comprehensive. And he said in response, that's not going to happen. We know comprehensive is not going to happen. So why is incremental change that we're trying to help you do a better job to pull down the numbers that we see? I mean, even you mentioned 2019 was an important year. Well, that was less than 1 million. Last year, 2.4 million. So even in that retrospective of a year that you're pointing to as a year that was, not emblematic of good policy, it still pales in comparison to where we are now. So give me 2 or 3 specific examples that we could do policy change that would make a difference.
Senator, I think the president on day one set forth a blueprint that
Well, pick 3 out of there that you think are the best, the most meaningful.
Senator, I would be quite hesitant to rank which ones are the best, but I continue to adhere to the approach that when we're speaking of a system that has not been reformed since 1996, that we need to reform it from top to bottom. For example, in the context of our country's economic prosperity, I hear from businesses in every state across the country about their need for labor. And we have a remarkable demand for labor. We have an international supply for labor, and yet we cannot seem to marry the two. And so in the economic context, I would say that there's a tremendous opportunity, just as there is in the asylum context.
Okay,
and these are inextricably intertwined, and I believe that we should take an encompassing approach to a problem that is quite expansive in scope.
We are trying, I think, to offer the administration, we being the Republicans here in the Senate, offering the administration substantive policy changes that will bring these numbers down. You mentioned 1996 is when the immigration law was last changed. You've been operating under the same immigration laws that every other administration has been since 1996. The numbers, for example, in FY14 were 568,000. We probably thought that was a big number back then. You've got the same laws, and still you're 5 times more people coming in. It tells me the policies around the immigration laws that are written in 1996 are what's causing the problems. And so those are the things that we can help you with to be able to afford change. I don't think saying keeping an open border is going to help our economic situation. You've obviously testified, we don't know who a lot of these people are. So let's get to the length of the backlog. If you go to New York City, what's the average time that your case would be heard, your asylum case would be heard?
Senator, it's a individualized case analysis, but I will tell you on average, it is multiple years in too many cases that it is the time of final adjudication of an asylum case because our case backlog is so significant across the system.
So I have a figure of 10 years. I don't know that it's exactly 10 years, but it's probably somewhere between 5 and 10, much, much too long, and you agreed with that. So you and I know each other pretty well because I was the chair and then ranking member on Homeland Security. Always trying to hire border agents has been an issue. So in the request, there's a request for another 1,000. You lost 700 last year from attrition. You're not even hired up to the amount that you can have now. How in the world are you going to hire an additional 1,000 officers when you can't even hire up to the allotted amount that you're appropriated for today?
Senator, let me first express my gratitude for your support of the Department of Homeland Security throughout the time that we have worked together. We are intensely focused on hiring reform, not just the hiring process itself, but also making advances in the polygraph process that, as you know, has been a challenge for many years. We are intensely focused on that administrative aspect of the challenge because we need additional personnel.
Thank you. I would suggest, too, more pay, better retention bonuses to be able to keep the people that you have. That's part of the package that we're putting forward here as ideas on ways to help. Thank you.
Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair. Thank you, Secretaries, for your willingness to testify before the committee. Just one comment on the question of border security, and this is mostly for my Republican friends, but also maybe for the Secretaries. Look, I think there is one theory of the case that says once we get into an immigration and border conversation, that the sort of old John Kerry aphorism, nothing is agreed to until everything is agreed to. That's not my point of view. I just wanted to lay that out there. It's not that I necessarily agree with what's being proposed by Republicans, but I do believe we should look for incremental improvements that can be executed in a 10-day or 6-week legislative time frame. And if we take Senator Graham at his word that he is trying to land a supplemental that at least to some degree hinges on a good faith effort on the border, we also have to understand that we're going to have to do this in chunks, and that in the context of an emergency security supplemental, there may be some changes. I don't know what it's going to be, and I'm not prepared to negotiate over the dais. I'm also not one of the key negotiators, but I just wanted to give you a flavor for, look, I think we're going to have to do some small things, and we can't say we can't do anything until we do everything. I just think that's not a tenable position, given the political configuration of the Congress and what we need to accomplish in the next 6 weeks. So, Secretary Mayorkas, back to my singular abiding concern, Maui. As you know, the wildfires destroyed Lahaina town and displaced about 11,000 people and destroying more than 3,000 property, the majority of which were rental housing. So the problem, first of all, FEMA's been great. FEMA has been extraordinary. And we put some money into the DERF to allow them to operate and provide resources. The problem that we have right now is timing. The burn zone is still not cleared. The EPA is doing good work with the Army Corps and others. It's going to be a year and a half total before those properties are even rebuildable. And even in an accelerated time frame, that means 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 years before these units are back up online. And that depends on individual property owners making choices that benefit some of the rental unit population. So a lot of people are going to be forced to leave Maui. I mean, that's just a fact. Should the federal government help disaster survivors stay in their communities?
Senator, I believe that the answer is yes, that we should try to do everything possible to rebuild, restore, and prove the resiliency of a community. The challenge in Maui has been quite unique because of its situation, as you well know, better than do I, as an island. And so there was initially the need to remove the hazardous material. Then, as you correctly note, there's the debris removal, which will be time-consuming because of the geographic and other challenges that the island confronts. But I do believe in devoting resources and energy to the rebuilding of a community rather than solely an exodus from it.
Okay, thank you. And we're, again, the FEMA people on the ground are excellent, but the thing that is causing me additional anxiety is that when they do their analysis, they have spreadsheets of how many people are currently being rehoused in hotels or in the long-term rental market or in the short-term rental market. And these numbers are dropping not because we are rehousing people in a more permanent situation, but because people are leaving the island. And I just wanted to flag that for you as a bad outcome. It is different than when you live on the continent and God forbid something happens to your town and you can take your FEMA money and find a place. You can put your stuff, if you have stuff remaining, and drive someplace and enter a new rental market or purchase a new home with your insurance money or with individual assistance money or whatever you were able to scrounge together. That is just not an option in West Maui, and I just wanted to flag that for you. And you and your department and FEMA have been extraordinarily flexible and responsive, but I don't want the memory of the fire itself to fade to the point where we fall back into normal bureaucratic positions and fail to recognize that Hawaii is the most isolated, heavily populated place on the planet. West Maui is even more isolated and even more expensive. And so as we think about helping these people to rebuild, it is not a matter of giving them a voucher and allowing them to fly to the mainland. And I appreciate your